Hello, everyone, and welcome today. My name is Dana Keep, and I'm here with my colleague, Becky King. Becky and I are the Career Education Alumni Career Advisors here at Wellesley College, for those of you we have not met, and we look forward to meeting you if we haven't had a chance to meet you. We know that these are very unusual times that we're living through, very difficult in many ways, and so we hope that you and your family and friends are doing well. We also know that this has been a time for a lot of people that has involved a lot of reflection, a lot of thinking about perhaps your job or your career. Maybe you've had time away from your physical office and you've had a chance to see things differently. Maybe you've just had some time to think more broadly about the rest of your career plans in a big way. So what we thought we would do today is introduce you to a book that we like very much, Designing Your Work Life. We think it's a very helpful and widely applicable book for people in various industries and at various stages of your career. The book is written by two Stanford Design School professors, Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. It's actually their second book. Their first one was Designing Your Life, and we've recommended that to many people, maybe you've heard of it. This Designing Your Work Life book just came out in February, so it is a newer one. It is the newest one. And what we'd like to do is introduce you to a few of the ideas in the book. And we think that they are positive actions and steps that you can take to think about what the future might look like, to sneak up on the future and think about how you might make the most of the job you're in, or how you might design your way to a job that's a better fit for you. So we're going to choose some things from the book that we think will help you.
Oh, you're not going to put them into the ground?
In that area. We're certainly not going to review the first book. The books can be read independently, but we do want to review the 6 mindsets of a designer, because those are fundamental to both of these books. And we think it's important for you to get a quick review of those if you have not read the first one, and even if you have, just a reminder. So mindsets are important, and the process of thinking like a designer does involve these mindsets. So we're going to start with that, and Becky will kick us off with the first one.
Welcome, everybody. And if you have questions, just a quick note, we won't have time until the end to get to them, but please put them in the chat and we will then take your questions. So the first of these mindsets won't be hard at all for any of you. It's curiosity. And we know that Wellesley alumni are all very curious about life, about jobs. So really think about what you are truly curious about and why. And set aside your rational skeptic. And when you're genuinely interested in things and people and organizations, it turns out that people are happy to engage with you. Interested is interesting. So think about other departments where you work. What do they do? Think about friends you may know who are satisfied in their work. What are they doing? How might your competitors be doing the same thing differently? So be curious about these things. Next, you need to take this curiosity and run with it. And that is try stuff. So that's the bias to action, which is very important for designers to build their way forward and not get stuck in too much thought and theory. So for example, Dana and I speak a lot about informational interviews. So you might try stuff by prototyping conversations with people who have jobs that you are interested in, you're curious about. You may ask someone for coffee or for lunch or for a walk, depending on who it is and where you are. You can also try stuff in action. You can join a board, you can volunteer. The important thing is to move forward and not stay in place thinking about it too long. The third mindset is critical for designers, and that's reframing. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Much of the book deals with reframing. What is that? Well, that is when you have a dysfunctional mindset, which tends to be binary. It tends to be something that sounds an awful lot like, my boss is terrible. I never get any feedback. I will never be happy here. Or I can never do what I really want to do because it won't earn enough money. Any of these types of, if you hear yourself in that, or for instance, in the last 4 months, focusing on all of the things we cannot do. We can't do all these fun things and vacations and trips and everything, right? And it's just not fair. And reframing it to what can I do? What can I control, right? So instead of I'm just a cog in this machine, you can reframe it. I'm a lever. I have impact on this machine. And furthermore, I'm a human being, not a machine. And so I deserve an interesting job.
Excellent. So the fourth designer mindset that we need to remember is that this is a process. We're not talking about a flash of inspiration or a lightning bolt that's going to hit you. We're talking about a multi-step process that allows you to go through and actually make progress and build your way forward. A lot of times people start thinking about the whole process and they get analysis paralysis. I know this happens to me. So they're thinking, okay, I'm curious about a lot of things, but I'm curious about too many things. What should I try? What if I don't like what I try? How many things can I try at once? And though that's a little bit too much for us to handle at one time. So if you know that you're in you're at the point of asking questions, you can focus on that. If you know you're at the point of trying things, you can focus on that. If you've tried some things and you say, okay, I've tried these things, now I want to evaluate and perhaps narrow down my choices. You know where you are. And by knowing where you are in the process, it allows you to make more progress. The next important mindset is that designing anything is a collaborative process. Rarely do people do this in a solitary way. So interacting with the world of work and workers is going to help you in two ways. It's going to help you realize that many people have your same questions and concerns. And it's going to help you realize, wow, I have so much to learn from the people who share my professional interests. And I can even help some of them too. So by helping others and letting others help you, everyone moves forward. And it's really important to know that this is a collaborative process. So reach out to people in different parts of your organization, former colleagues, friends and family, Wellesley alums, alums from your graduate school, neighbors, you name it, and try to radically collaborate with them. And finally, the final mindset is telling your story. This is actually a mindset that Bill and Dave, the authors, added from their first book. They added it to their second book because they realized that telling your story is a really important part of being a designer. And telling stories is the way that we connect with people, and it's the way that we make meaning of our lives. And you want to be able to tell your story, the evolution of your interests, the evolution of your skills, to future employers, to future colleagues. And you have to be able to do that effectively. Remember that if you are out there actually being curious and trying stuff, you will have a far more interesting story to tell than if you're just sitting on your couch thinking. That doesn't usually lead to the best stories. But if you think to yourself, oh, I'm a terrible storyteller, I don't even know how to begin, certainly make an appointment with Becky or me because we do talk to a lot of people about this. And it's a skill you can become better at, and it is an important skill. So even if you don't necessarily think of yourself as a storyteller, it's something you can work on and something you can improve at. So those are the 6 designer mindsets. For the remainder of our webinar, we've taken the liberty of dividing it into 2 sections. The first section is, I'm going to stay in my job, or at least with my company or organization. What should I be thinking about? What can I do? And the second part is, I've decided I am going to leave this job and organization. How do I quit well? And what can I think about to help me design a next move that's even a better fit than the one I have now? So Becky's going to kick off that first section.
So Bill and Dave got a lot of feedback from their first book, and people said, you know, this designing your life is great, but I can't afford to just quit my job and go off to a tropical island and teach scuba diving. And so could you please focus on work? And they got so much feedback on this, they said, let's focus on work. And it turns out that we spend 80,000 to 125,000 hours of our life at work. So, and a Gallup poll recently showed that 69% of Americans are disengaged or dissatisfied at work. And globally, that percentage goes up to 85%. And so they said, let's see if we can apply these design mindsets to work. And so that's how this book came about. And the reasons for dissatisfaction are numerous. My boss is a micromanager. My job is boring. I don't get enough appreciation and feedback. Any of these could be, true. But the point they make is, let's see if you can redesign in place and make something good enough for now, not forever, but for now. And that might be because you have financial constraints, a mortgage, need insurance, etc. And so the premise here is make your focus good enough to make it worthwhile to go in for the next 6 months, 8 months, 9 months as you redesign your next move. What is this all about? Well, it's about adding hope, really. It's about good enough for now, gives you hope. It gives you a better time to plan a better outcome in the future. And it alters your focus, which is very important, going back to that reframe. Also, they've noticed that our dissatisfaction tends to stem from being stuck on what they call a hedonic treadmill, which is a fancy way of saying we always think we need more. Everybody else has it figured out except for me. We're all guilty of this. I know I am. And it turns out not everybody else has it all figured out. But if we get more money, a better promotion, a different job, if we get more followers on our social media, everything will be good, right? This is the trap. And this is that dysfunctional mindset that I referenced earlier. So most of this book is really about encouraging you to move from that child in the back seat on a road trip who says, oh, are we there yet? Are we there yet? I don't even want to be on this road trip. Are we there yet? To the driver, to take ownership and agency. And before you can figure out where you're going, of course, you need to know where you are. And they are not advocating that you just slap a happy sticker on things, lump it, and stay in this job that makes you miserable. That is absolutely not what this is about. It is about reframing. So instead of renaming it and saying, I'm just going to be happy, right? The trick here is to reframe, to actually reorganize your perception and point of view. So in other words, not just make the best of a bad situation. That's a fine aphorism, fine advice, but in the end, you're still in the bad situation. So the point here is to say, I'm unhappy because, let's say, that boss who is not giving you enough feedback. You can control. There are many things we can't control. We've learned that over the last 4 months, right? There is just so much we are not able to control in this pandemic, for example. What can you control, though? And this is the important piece. So if you're in a job right now for good enough for now, I'm in this job because it earns a good paycheck and it has good health insurance, and I have a child who has a chronic ailment and I need that health insurance. So that's my reframe for good enough for now. And it gives you a whole different mindset as you go into work, thinking and focusing on that. Also, you may focus with your curiosity mindset on what else can I be learning right now? Are there things I can be learning that make my job a little less dull? Are there people I could be meeting, reaching out to, and having those prototype conversations with? Sure, that's a reframe. So it's that using of bias to action, figuring out who your talented coworkers are, and moving away from the negative. Because believe us, Dana and I have both been there, it's easy to fixate on frustrations and what isn't working. And instead, flip it and be grateful for the things you can control that you do have. And again, it's not forever, it's just for now. Another important piece of advice as you're making this reframe, redesign in place is to be incremental, start small. We set ourselves up for failure when we make radical change and we're going to shoot the moon. And the problem with that is 2/3 of all diets fail, 90% of New Year's resolutions are dropped by March. And so instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to run a marathon, or you know what, I'm going to play the banjo like that guy in Dueling Banjos, that's going to set me up for failure because I've been on the couch watching Netflix for the last 4 months. So instead, start small, start the bar low, and raise it up slowly, just like a high jumper would start jumping over that bar and clearing it, and then raising it a little bit higher, so that from couch potato to marathon might look more like I'm going to walk 6,000 steps. Next week, I'm going to walk 10,000 steps. The following week, I'm going to run a mile. The following week, and this is a fast, obviously, I'm speeding it up, but then I'm going to work my way up to a 5K. Then I'm going to work my way up to a 10K. And maybe then I want to run that marathon. Or maybe in the meantime, I've become curious and taken a bias to action and gotten involved in some different endeavor. And that's all fine because now I'm in better shape than I was before. So the point they're making is start small. Set the bar low. That way you build yourself up slowly for success. Also, important here, notice what's working. That goes back to that awareness mindset. What is working? What is not working? And to that end, and in the first book, if you read the first book, this is that gratitude journal piece. In this setting with work, it's about what am I learning? What do I initiate? And who do I help? And if you can ask yourself these 3 questions, then you're going to get more out of your job, because studies show that in order for us to be engaged at work, we need to be learning something new every day, or unlearning something. By that, I mean something we assumed to be true, but we find out it isn't in fact true, right? So that's learning every day, and it doesn't have to be big, by the way. It can be exciting, and Dana and I joke about this, to learn some small piece of technology or some new functionality in Zoom. Or, wow, we just learned how to share screen, last week. Great, that's fabulous, right? These are little things, but they really do matter in terms of your engagement. And they have a whole set of worksheets, I should mention this, on their website, and we're happy to share that with any of you who are curious. And it's really helpful to actually use these worksheets to keep yourself accountable for your Monday through Friday. What am I learning? What am I initiating? And whom am I helping? And also, if you want Saturday and Sunday to be bonus days, sure, add those into the mix, because a lot of what we're talking about is work related, but work in a holistic sense of your life. So initiating, taking change, leading something, that's also important. At least once a week, try to take some, lead on something or change something, do it differently. And also, who are we helping? Again, helpfulness, super important as human beings for us to feel purposeful and meaningful. So it might be refilling the paper in the copy machine before it runs out. It might be, and this is something one of our coworkers did at the beginning of the pandemic. She sewed a bunch of masks, and she said, if any one of you or your friends needs masks, I have about 70 on my porch right now. Feel free, come by and take one. These are small gestures, but they add up and they mean a lot. So the important thing in all of that too is to reflect, right? This is the part of the awareness mindset, is reflect. And this can be over 3 or 4 weeks that you're keeping this journal of what you are, these 3 questions. And also, if you're setting a goal, make sure you allow at least 8 weeks to see that change. And change is hard, so go easy on yourself. Don't expect a miracle. Go easy on yourself with setting those goals and hitting those goals. If you only hit 70% of them, you are doing well.
Great. I absolutely love those 3 reflection questions. They are so simple and so important. And even spending part of your day focusing on what is working, on the positives, help us when we're dealing with the things that are not so positive. And there is some of that, and more of that these days than usual. So I really love those questions. Okay. Bill and Dave must love alliteration. I guess we all do. So they have designed the 4 R's to help us go through a process to think about your current job or your current organization and make sure you're not missing an opportunity that's kind of staring you right in the face and you're overlooking it. And remember that these 4 R's are not related to the kind of work situation that's really toxic, or if you're really in a bad spot and for your own mental health, you need to get out. That's a different story, and we're happy to help with that, and that's more serious. These 4 R's relate to people who like their current job well enough and want to tweak it, or really like their company or their organization and want to stay there, but may need a different role. So let's start with reframe. I'm going to run through these 4. I'm going to give you even more examples. And I know we're giving you a lot of examples about reframing, but we're hoping that with a number of them, it will help you to reframe other parts of your life or your work life and can really help you. So Reframing is a designer's tool that helps you get rid of dysfunctional beliefs and helps you tell a different, more positive story that gives you more agency and more hope in your life. Here's example one. Let's say you majored in art history and you say, oh, I can't believe I majored in that. I no longer want to work for an art museum. I'm really interested in coding and computer science. Rats, I wasted that time. Well, it's over, so you can't go back. And so you want to think of that in a really positive way. And the reframe could be, I loved majoring in art history. I will be always interested in the great works of art of our times and history or future. And I want to still do that. And the visual analytical skills that I learned as an art history major are always going to be able to help me in my life. And I may even use them when I'm designing software programs. So I'm glad that I majored in art history, and I'm going to start taking some coding classes now to move in a new direction. A second example of reframing might be, I always wanted to be a doctor, but I was never able to afford it. It was just too expensive. I had life circumstances that left me out of it, and I couldn't do it. So I'm just never going to be able to have that dream, and it's too late now. A reframe might be, I do love medicine. I did have some tough obstacles, and I wasn't able to do that, but perhaps now I could start taking some classes and I could train to be a physician's assistant. Maybe I could even be a physical therapist. Maybe I could still help people with their health in some way. But maybe it's not the way I originally envisioned, but maybe it's still a really good way. So that's another thing. And finally, a third example of reframe might be, I'm working in this job that pays a good salary, but I feel like my job is not meaningful. I feel like I just am losing my soul and I don't really like it. And I'm stuck here. I'm just stuck. A reframe might be, this salary is going to help me pay for graduate school, or this salary is going to help me finish paying tuition for my kids. And for the moment, while I'm here, I'm going to see if I can work with those in our company who are working on diversity and inclusion. And I want to help them because this is really important to me and would add meaning to my life. So that's how I'm going to add meaning there. All right, that's the first R, which is reframe. The second one is remodel. Remodeling can happen in two ways. The first one is really aligning your tasks. It's really adding more of what you like and taking away what you don't like. It's adding more things that relate to your strengths. If you don't like your strengths, if you don't know about your strengths, I'm sorry, you might consider taking the Clifton Strengths Finder, or there's an assessment online that costs a small fee, or the VIA Institute also has an assessment online that's free. So it's important to think about your strengths and see if you can realign your work to match them a little bit better. The other way you can remodel is to remodel the logistics of your work, maybe the days that you work, the hours that you work, or whether you work remotely or not. So let's go for a couple of examples here. Let's say you really like your job, but you also love meeting new people and having an influence on your company culture. Maybe you could raise your hand to join some search committees or lead some search committees and interview new candidates for roles at your firm. That way you're adding more of your strength, which is relating to people, and you're having an influence on your company that feels really meaningful to you. A second example would be, let's say you really hate creating spreadsheets, and there's a different person in your company or a department that actually does a lot of that. Maybe it's an intern in your company that loves doing it. Could you have that person or department do the spreadsheets, and that way you take that off your plate and replace it with something that aligns better with your strengths? Good thing to do here might be to do a trial run and then talk with everybody after a month or two and see if the shift in those responsibilities is working well for everyone. And finally, under the idea of remodeling your logistics, you might, again, want to suggest a trial run with your manager, but you might say, could I have my workday from 7 to 3? Because that would really help with my childcare responsibilities in the afternoon. And if something like that works after a couple of months and everyone can see that the work is being done, and no one feels like they have to commit to it without a test, that can be really effective in helping you remodel your job that you like and stay there, but just have it fit your life a little bit better. Okay. The final two R's are relocate and reinvent. And these are both things that you're going to redesign, but they both involve a move. Remember that in your current company, you have built relationships, you have built credibility, you know this company and you have experience with it. So before you toss that, you don't want to, you might want to think about whether that's worth keeping and is there a place in your current role that you could move. So by designing your way into one of these relocation or reinvention areas, you might give yourself room to grow or a new challenge or maybe even a promotion. So a couple of examples here. Let's say an example for relocating might be that you are involved in the marketing department and you find that you are consistently drawn to the social media piece of it. Your company has decided that social media is increasingly important to your company and they're going to have a new role created that would be the director of social media. Well, with your transferable skills and your interest and your experience in the marketing department, you would be a natural fit for that role. So that could be an example of a slight shift, a relocation in your company that is better suited to you. What about something more drastic? What if you really want to reinvent yourself? You've been a research scientist at a university and you love being on campus, but surprisingly, you're not loving the lab as much as you used to. And you find yourself more drawn to wanting to help students on campus. Well, that might involve something more drastic. Maybe you would want to shadow some people who are in student services roles on campus. Maybe you want to practice informally helping students with their research. It might involve going back for a master's degree or a certificate. But if you know that, you can take the time and take those actions to help you reinvent yourself. So you can stay where you are, but find something that fits better. So reframe, remodel, reinvent, relocate, or reinvent. Those are the four R's that you can take a look at as you're looking at your current place. But what if you decide, okay, I've been through all of those and there just really aren't any options there. I think either my organization has changed or my interests have changed or life has changed and I really need to go somewhere else. I really want to figure out how to leave here well, leave on good terms. How do we do that?
Okay, thank you. And I apologize. I was trying to answer some of the chat questions with entering the site of Designing Your Life with worksheets, and all of a sudden realized I can't do that while I'm sharing screen. So crazy screen there. So what you can do is that you can quit well. And what that looks like is you need to leave gracefully and not just go out in a blaze of glory. Now that is tempting, and there are basically two types of ways people usually quit. One of them, as we've seen in movies and heard in songs like Take This Job and Shove It, is the bridge burner. The bridge burner is very dramatic and it's tempting when you're really unhappy to sort of leave that way, but it's a scorched earth and it hurts you in the long run. The second way is a 2-week lame duck. Now that is I give 2 weeks notice, I look at my calendar, I say, okay, July 15th is my last day, and I write a brief memo. It's been fun working here. I'm moving on. July 15th will be my last day. Thank you so much. I wish you the best. Now, they say there's nothing wrong with that, but they argue that there is a third better option for leaving your job: generative quitting. What does that look like? Well, it means instead of thinking of it as a negative thing, quitting can be seen as a very negative thing, but in fact, everything changes and everything comes to an end. So you focus on it as a positive thing, right? It's just renewal, you're moving on, it's a new chapter in your life. And so this is a way for you to be the author, really, of that final chapter and authoring the first chapter of your next step. They ask you to give yourself these 4 prerequisite questions before you quit. Number one is what we've spent most of this webinar on, which is redesign. Try it, try redesigning, right? And if it doesn't work, you're still better off than you were before, because in the meantime, you will have learned a lot about yourself, the job, the industry. Secondly, consider talking to your boss. That may seem like, well, why would I want to talk to my boss? But it could help, because worst case scenario, you ask, what am I doing wrong? And your boss says, well, starting with A, B, C, D, these are all the things I wish you would do differently. Okay, that's hard to take, no doubt, but it gives you feedback that may help you moving forward in the next step of your life. Best case scenario, what am I doing wrong? You're doing nothing wrong. You're absolutely one of my best performers. Are you not getting that message? I'm so sorry. Let's talk about that. And you have a wonderful clarifying conversation and you go, wow, I didn't know that. That was good that I talked. So it's kind of a win-win to give that a try. Third choice, choose quitting. Don't let quitting choose you. What does that mean? Quitting choosing you would sound something like a last resort. This is the last straw. I have to quit. Or involuntary outcome. I had no alternative but to quit. Injustice. This wasn't fair. Or fate. It was just one of those things. And their argument is, please make it planful. You choose to quit. You set the whole thing up yourself. It isn't just one of those things. It's something that you have been mindfully biased to action, prototyping, etc., and being aware all along. And the fourth one, if it's possible, try to find a new job first for financial stability reasons and just ease of hiring. Bosses tend to be, supervisors tend to be preferential to people who currently are employed. However, many of us may not have that luxury, and they say in the book, don't worry, if that's the case, you can still keep on designing your next step. Just as a prerequisite, it's there. The 4 steps may seem pretty straightforward, but my favorite is leave the campsite better than you found it. My dad was an Eagle Scout, and we took a lot of camping and hiking trips in my youth. So leaving the company better than you found it is the idea here, and it's really as a favor to your colleagues and friends that you clean up things before you leave. Rev up your network is absolutely helpful to you. It's back to that radical collaboration, asking for help mindset, and you are reinforcing your existing connections, those within your sphere at work and those outside of work. And you are building your network. You are expanding it beyond the people you already know. If you're not using the Wellesley Hive, for example, which is our specific to Wellesley networking platform, we encourage you to do so. Expand your circle. And they warn, be discreet, be careful who you tell in advance. I'm thinking of quitting. You may have a confidant, and that can be very helpful to you if this is a trustworthy individual, but you need to be careful because word leaks out and maybe the decision gets taken away from you, right? And it spreads before you're ready to spread the news. The third important step is setting your replacement up for success. And what does that mean? Well, if cleaning the campsite, leaving the company better for colleagues and friends step is for that reason, this is cleaning up any possible messes with your name on them. So you want to create maybe a manual, and they talk about this is not a 200-page manual. This is a very brief, this is my job manual, including who are super helpful people that this new person stepping into your role will need to tap. What kind of special information, insider knowledge will they have to help you succeed? Are there pressing problems they should be aware of? Are there problems you have attended to, but they could rear up again if left unattended? What are your regular meetings and activities, and so on and so forth for that. So also the final important piece in your manual is to give a short summary. If you have a team reporting to you, give a short summary of the strengths. So the new boss will have a positive impression of the team that they are inheriting. And the fourth important part of this, exiting well, quitting well, is if you're a film buff, and I love movies, filmmakers always say the 2 most important aspects in a movie are the climax and the conclusion. And this is your chance to be the screenwriter of your final scene. And people are going to remember you. So you want them to remember you positively, want you back, leave them laughing. And you want to tell a positive, consistent story upon your exit, thanking people appropriately. Resist the temptation, and it can be tempting when you feel bitter and angry to burn those bridges again and resist the temptation to say, well, you know why I'm leaving, right? It's because this particular individual is just insufferable. You don't need to put that in your narrative. Your narrative is about you and the positive steps you are taking to move into this next, like a chambered nautilus, right? You're moving into the next chamber. It's one of my favorite symbols is the chambered nautilus shell. You're moving on, and this is what you're needing to move on for. And if you focus it on that instead of on the universal, that will tell your story in a positive way.
Terrific. Okay, so if you've decided that you are going to leave, you may want a framework to think about the big picture, because you want to think about your life holistically and you want to think about the elements of it. So we have a graphic here from the book that shows an example of 3 columns: money, impact, and expression. And I'll explain where this came from. So I'm going to ask you to use the analogy of being a sound engineer and you're mixing 3 tracks to make a great song. And you have to adjust the tracks so that the right mix is perfect, or perfect for the moment, or perfect for the song. So because of our conversations with people, Becky and I know that a lot of people grapple with the money and the meaning question. And I know that from reading the books that Bill and Dave have grappled with students and their questions, and alums with their questions about that as well. So that's very common. And some people think that making money and making meaning are mutually exclusive, or they just don't go together in any way. And we'd like to suggest that in many ways they can go together and they can be part of your coherent life. And Bill and Dave have also discovered through their conversations that there's this piece of expression, the part about putting your creative ideas out into the world, that's really important to most people. And that's why there are 3 columns and not just 2. And with the expression piece, we're not just talking about I'm an actor, I'm a painter, I'm a musician, or I'm a writer. People are creative in many different ways. So we want to think very broadly about creativity when we're thinking about that. All right, I'm going to run through these 3 areas, and I'm also going to give you examples of what if you need to increase that bar and that particular column in your life right now. So in the nonprofit world, in the market economy, we talk about making money. In the nonprofit world, we talk about making impact. And in the artistic or creative economy, we talk about expression, creative expression. So the money piece is fairly easy to understand. We all have bills to pay. Perhaps we are saving for a down payment on a house. Perhaps we just need more to cover our basic expenses. Perhaps we're putting away money for graduate school. So if you need to increase that lever on your particular maker mix, you could try some things under that same try stuff idea that we talked about as a designer mindset. You might say, I'm going to take a class after work to increase my skills so that I can work towards a promotion, which would also involve a salary increase. Or you might say, I'm going to add a side gig tutoring physics because it's my favorite subject and I love doing it, and a lot of people don't like physics. So I'm going to be able to save some money if I can do some physics tutoring. Or perhaps you might say, I think my spending has gotten out of control. I'm going to get rid of my gym membership. I'm going to sell my car and take some public transportation. I'm going to stop subscribing to several streaming services. I really need to simplify my life so that I can live on a little bit less for now or forever. So those are some examples of how you might raise the bar on your money column if that's what you need to do at the moment. The next one is impact, and this is so individual. Truly, some people want to make an impact on a huge scale, a programmatic scale. Some people want to make an impact in one person's life by helping that single person. Some people might use data to make an impact. Some people might use their relationship building skills to make an impact. Some people might use a talent that they have to help others. So this is your way of wanting to make an impact is probably not going to be your colleague's way or your friend's way or many other people's way. So make sure that you're doing what is meaningful to you. So examples that you might think about if you want to increase your impact. What if you want to increase your impact with the next generation? You have a lot of life experience and you love sharing it, and you've gotten a lot of good feedback that people respect your experience and your way of sharing it. Maybe you would mentor younger employees in your organization. Maybe you would initiate a program for middle school girls who are interested in STEM careers. Or maybe you would just offer to be a big brother or be a big sister, in a big sister, I guess, in this, in your community. So those are ways that you can mentor and find some more meaning in your life as a whole or in your company. What if you're just a person who loves data and you absolutely love looking at trends and numbers, and this is what really makes you happy? Maybe you can improve a process in your company to make it so much more efficient and really help your colleagues' lives run more efficiently. Wow, what a great impact to have. And that would arise because you really love looking at numbers and data. What if you are working in a human resources department at a hospital and you love your work, but you're also really committed to the environment? Maybe you could start a recycling effort at the hospital, or maybe in your town, you could join the committee that helps think about recycling in your town as a whole. So you've noticed with those examples that we're thinking about at work examples and in your life examples. Finally, the expression piece, and again, I mentioned before, we want to think very broadly about this. Are you creating art, or are you just being very creative in the way that you design a philanthropic fundraising campaign? There could be a lot of different ways to be creative. So here are some examples. What if you love creating digital art, but the work that you like to do, you can't get paid for? So you might say, I'm going to join a firm that does graphic design and creates logos so I can get paid to do some kind of graphic design, but then I'm also going to do my art on the side and see where that leads. Or maybe you're just a big fan of the arts and you say, I'm going to help the arts flourish in my city. I'm going to join a board, and I might even take piano lessons because that's something I've always thought about. Or finally, you might love your company and your role, but you might say, hey, I have acting skills and I have writing skills. And when new people join our company right now, they have to sit through a very boring presentation and read a very boring manual. So I'm going to make that whole process of welcoming people to our company more fun and more interesting. And I can do that with some of my talents. So you'll see on the slide that we have up that Bill's current maker mix involves a lot of impact, but as he moves to the next phase of his life, he wants to increase his expression more. And he mentions in the book that he really wants to do a lot more painting. And he's okay with his impact going down to allow the expression to go up. So it's important to realize that you're going to review this maker mix. You're going to be the sound engineer at various times in your life and make the maker mix fit for now. Just as we said before, it doesn't have to be forever. For example, if you're working and going to school at the same time, you might not have a ton of space for a lot of expression. That may be a time when your expression is very low. But that's okay, because in the future, you might readjust. So think of your work holistically and think of your maker mix, think of your life holistically in terms of your maker mix, and review your maker mix periodically to make sure it's adjusted for the moment. And because you're all Wellesley alums who want to make a difference in the world, we know that that impact piece is particularly important to many of you.
And so they've designed a tool called the impact map. And as you can see, it's fairly straightforward. The type of impact on the horizontal line goes from fixing things, renewing things, repairing things, along the spectrum of sustaining and supporting endeavors, projects, organizations. And at the far right side, you see new, that's all in innovation. And that would be the entrepreneurial realm. On the vertical axis, you can see far global impact at the top, near personal impact at the bottom, of the closest being one-on-one impact, and of course, being someone at a think tank or policy center, making global impact at the top. The important thing thinking about this tool is that there isn't a right, wrong, good, bad, better, etc. Sphere, right? We often think, oh, I want to be in this quadrant between innovation and global impact. That must be, you know, the more desirable, better place to be. No, not necessarily. It depends on what works for you. And so to put this in context, so it doesn't become too much of a theory here, they have shown what the impact map with sample jobs might look like. And the fun part here in the worksheets for you is you can take this idea and put and map your jobs. Let's say you've had 6 or 7 different jobs. You can plot them on this quadrant. If you've had global impact and entrepreneurial stuff, you put your job here. If instead you've been fixing things, you would put them at this end, right? And a more interpersonal, near close one-on-one or small group area. If you are, in this case, obviously at the Gates Malaria Program level, you are fixing malaria in a global sense. If instead you were working for malaria relief, one-on-one, you know, administering medications to people, then you'd be more in the lower left sector. And so you can do this for yourself, and even you can take a current job you have, and there's usually not one dimension to your job. There are many different aspects of each of our jobs. And so you can think about the different aspects of your job and where they might fall in this map. And then you might think, what do I enjoy most? And this is the fun part, is then reflecting on where your jobs have largely fallen. Are most of your jobs in the individual impact and sustainability area, or are most of your jobs in the global and innovation area? Does that interest you the most? So that's a kind of a way to help you see where you're happiest. They give an example for their jobs, and they have multifaceted lives and jobs and what they're doing. At Stanford as professors, they put themselves in the one-on-one impacting one student or one classroom at a time area down here. Designing, it's a life design lab, so there is some innovation aspect to it, but they're also supporting, so they put that here. In the educational leadership quadrant, they put themselves more in the larger impact, right? The global, more global impact arena. And as authors, of course, that's their largest global reach. So they're closest up in that area. And more towards sustaining, supporting than in innovation in that respect. So, that's that.
And I can say that Becky and I really love helping people one-on-one, and doing these webinars is kind of more of our global reach. Maybe not global, but we like both elements there. All right, so today we have shared what we hope are some thought-provoking ideas and frameworks with which you can evaluate and perhaps change your current job or think about quitting and finding a better fit. In one webinar, we certainly couldn't cover all 10 chapters of the book. There are other sections that revolve around being your own boss. There's a chapter on office politics, power and influence. There's a section that describes very carefully different ways that you might be overwhelmed and how to address those, and the difference between being overwhelmed and being burned out, which is a pretty serious difference. And there's a section on talking about graduate school. So there are other sections that we know many of you will find helpful, and we hope that you will dive in. If you have questions now, we welcome you to type them into the chat, and we'd love to take a few questions. And we also want to remind you that we are available for individual conversations about your own maker mix, your own brainstorming on what things you want to try, your own storytelling. You can make appointments with Becky and me through Handshake this summer. in the fall, and we would love to help you with your own stories. So feel free to do that. And again, the books are Designing Your Life and Designing Your Work Life. The authors are Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. And the first one is in libraries now. This one is the newest one and should be getting to libraries pretty soon, but maybe not just yet. And with that, we will conclude our presentation unless there are any questions. Yes, alums all have access to Handshake. You need to have your Wellesley email address. You can email us if you have questions. You can just look on joinhandshake.com, and you do have to get, you do have to sign in there.
You can go to My Wellesley. If you go to the My Wellesley site, that's where you log in, and your credentials will work for both the Wellesley Hive, which I mentioned as a networking tool, and for Handshake, which is how we make appointments. And there are you know, many aspects in both Handshake and the Hive. But if you're having any trouble at all, let us know. We can definitely help you overcome any logging in challenges you may be facing. I also quickly wanted to mention, because I forgot, and I think it's an important piece, the impact map with the sample jobs. You can move from one sector to the other, in case that wasn't clear. You may start out as a barista at Starbucks, for example, making one latte at a time. Obviously, that's one-on-one, right? Fixing, sustaining. But you may decide to move into more global reaching jobs along the way. And so just so we're clear, you can, you have total mobility in that as well. I believe there was a question earlier about StrengthsFinder, and that has been under different names. It was StrengthsQuest at one point. It's now Clifton Strengths, I believe, is its new branded name. And there are different, there's a sliding scale of cost in terms of whether you get your top 5 or whether you get the more comprehensive strengths results on that. There are other numerous worksheets Dana and I have, and free sites as well. So just to be clear on that. But they do mention, Bill and Dave do mention strengths as an aspect. Once you get a hold of what your strengths are, you might put that in your maker mix as well in terms of finding a happier situation.
All right, terrific. Well, I see I see some lovely thank yous, and we really thank you all for joining us. And we appreciate your involvement and asking questions, and we wish you all the best. And we are happy, remember that we're here for you, and we're happy to help if we can anytime. So take care, be well, and we look forward to talking with you.
Thank you.